I mean, Ryan, firstly, it was... I first watched the series when it first aired, and then I watched it a few days ago, the full series. And the first time I watched it, when it first aired, I'll be honest, I didn't notice you once. The only thing that caught my eye was, you were noticed as an MMA trainer. I was like, okay, an MMA trainer in there. But watching it again, I noticed that the first time you kind of brought in to speak with the guards, you said you kind of got a lot of discipline from your upbringing. You said you had you had a single mum who took care of you. You had two half sisters. Yeah, just walking through your upbringing. What was that whole thing like?
So from the ages of from being born effectively until I was about 11, I had mum was a single parent. I had no brothers and sisters as such, and which in and of itself is not that unusual, in the UK or Ireland today. But what's probably a little bit more unusual about it was that I grew up in a pretty rough area, and that's kind of, I guess, framed by the troubles in Northern Ireland. And I'm from a Catholic background, and I lived in a very Protestant council estate, and it was quite hostile, and there wasn't very many Catholics around, and being like a sort of only child and also not having a dad around, that probably instilled a sense of needing to protect yourself, and I think that's why I always was drawn towards martial arts books and martial arts films. And I remember in our school library in primary school, they had a judo textbook and a karate textbook, and I used to I had them out on loan for the entirety of my primary school, and I would just read them over and over again. And my mum did Japanese jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, and she would teach me throws, and my friends would do boxing, and I would learn bits and pieces from everybody. And I guess way back then, without knowing it, was probably quite close to MMA, just learning how to defend yourself, and also having lots of fights because you're in that kind of environment, so fights were just a everyday thing. And that's my upbringing as such. And then something that they didn't really mention, I suppose, in that show, which that conversation is obviously edited to a certain extent, was that when I was 10 or 11, I met my stepdad, and he did a lot of martial arts as well, and he instilled a lot of the sort of things that I know now, like how to throw punches, how to stand, how to defend yourself, how to kick, little simple things. He taught me a lot of that way early on, and he kind of pushed me further in the martial arts, So it was almost like it sort of happened to me. It wasn't like I planned for it. It just was one of them things that I was always going to end up doing it, and that's it really.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed was, you obviously throughout the show you were very quiet. You said to the guards, to Ant, that you are a quiet person. You're never the first to kind of speak up in a group. Is there a reason for that, or is that just kind of your personality? You're just a quiet guy in general.
I would say people that know me probably say I'm not that quiet. I think all quiet people have this thing where they're known as a quiet person, but yet the people like their mom and dad or their girlfriend or whoever probably says they're not that quiet. I don't think anybody's truly quiet all the time. Yeah. It's just that when I meet a new group of people, I think it's a good strategy to sit back and sort of look at what's going on, and anytime I enter a new bunch of people, regardless of whether it's martial arts or a job or whatever, I always kind of sit back and I just like to see what kind of people I want to be around. I wouldn't say I'm quiet, but I'll probably limit myself to, I would rather speak to one really cool person than 10 dickheads. Yeah. And that's my strategy. I wouldn't say I'm overly quiet. It was just in that situation, you've got 29 other guys, and they're all alphas, and it's a very weird situation to be in right from the off. And everybody was trying to show themselves to be this and that, and I just thought, well, I'll just sit back and I'll just see how this plays out, keep myself in the middle of the pack and just say nothing to nobody. And I'd already read about the SAS and stuff and how they look for that kind of person that can blend in to any environment. So yeah, I knew roughly what they were looking for, but I didn't plan that way. No, it was just one of them things that just sort of fortuitous that my personality fitted the mold that they needed at that time.
Yeah, I think looking at the whole series, I think you were probably you along with Freddie, who also completed the course, probably you two are probably the most strategic people in there, from start to finish. First off, I've the biggest question I've got regarding the course: why put yourself through that? Why go through that?
I guess it's probably the same reason why pick professional martial arts as a career. It's like, I think everybody's got a yearning to pick something to test themselves with, And probably for me, looking back, most likely my childhood experiences give me that drive to do something that put myself in uncomfortable situations just to see if I could survive it or not. And that's why I fight for a living as such. And that exact same drive was like, I looked at that, it just popped up into an email, and it was weird how it just came out of nowhere, out of left field, and instantly I was like, oh, that's something I'd like to give it a go. It was just weird, you know. It was one of them things. Is like another point about it is that people don't really know is that I've always like had like an interest towards the military, but growing up where I grew up, the military wouldn't have had the best best reputation.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, it would be very unusual for like a Catholic boy growing up in Derry, where I'm from, or to join the military. This wouldn't happen, you know.
Yeah.
But looking from an outsider's perspective, there's a lot of things about it that I really thought that was interesting, like the camaraderie and the training and the discipline and things that really appealed to me. So when this came up, it felt like the perfect opportunity to get a taste of it without actually having to go and do the real thing.
Yeah. How fit were you going in? Were you in kind of fight shape going into the course?
I would say like I'm always training 6 days a week. There's not a week that I don't train, you know, and I never train less than 4 days a week. Any week, all year round, fight camp or not. So it's not like I'm unfit, but the fitness you require for that is like a different kind of fitness. And I got like 6 weeks out, I realized I was going to be on it for sure. And friends of mine that are ex-military and stuff like that, they told me, right, you need to get running fit. That's going to be, because it's the hills phase and wheels, and it's all hills, it's all running, it's all packs. Yeah. Carrying weight over distances that's the main thing the main thing they're testing, at least, or just your ability to withstand that. And I sort of had an inkling that it was all going to be guys that were like triathletes and runners and stuff, and I'm made for like 5 minute.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? 5 minute blast, 1 minute rest. That's my body type now. It's just so ingrained in you as a MMA athlete.
Yeah.
So I just put packs on my back and I ran all the time. That was it. Like I just took off every day. Like Monday, I still train full time, but on a Monday I did sprints. On a Wednesday I did like middle distance. On a Friday I would do like 5-10 miles with a pack on, and then every Saturday or Sunday I would do like, you know, anything from like 5 till 30 miles depending on the week. The last exercise I did right before I left for the course, I did like, my girlfriend, fiance now, she dropped me off in the middle of the Northumberland, and I just picked the spot 30 miles away as the crow flies. I just pointed at a field and I was like, I need to be there, and then I just navigated my way back with like 50 pounds on, because I knew that was going to be the rough, the requirements, and all that stuff paid off massively. Yeah. Because I got there and guys like Freddie are like, they are just made for endurance. They've got one gear, yeah, and they can just go forever. I mean, nothing I've ever seen like. That Freddie, he did this thing called Enduro Man just after, where he ran 75 miles, he hopped in the channel, he swam the channel, got out, and then cycled to Paris from Calais. So they're like extreme endurance athletes, you know. He's like only the third youngest person ever to do it or something crazy. So you're trying to keep up with these guys, and I was just looking at their basically their backsides the whole time during this course, thinking, is this ever going to end? Like, I just couldn't catch them. But I managed to stay just in enough distance that I didn't get caught.
Yeah,
that was key.
The first time we saw you and a lot of the other competitors meet the staff was in the assembly hall, and they kind of give you a briefing. But I assume you met.
Nah,
oh, was that the first time?
They made it as like a lot of things that people don't realize, which are pretty cool looking back, is that we didn't know exactly what was going to happen in terms of, they didn't tell us anything. They didn't tell us who the staff were, what the course was going to be about. They just said, you need to be here on this date in the middle of Wales. So I turned up in the middle of Wales, and it was just a little shitty B&B, and there was nobody else around. They left me a package saying like, here's some food at 7 a.m. be ready, nothing else. So I didn't know what to pack, didn't know anything. So I just turned up, kind of winged it. Got up at 7 in the morning, walked out, and there's this minivan pulls up, and all these guys are hooded. There's about 7 or 8 guys sitting in the back, all hooded with like the black goggles on, and I was like, all right. So I hopped in, hooded me, goggled me, and like cable tied us or whatever. Took us off the location, dropped us off, opened the doors of the van, and you're standing in the middle of this compound, like in the middle of nowhere. And I stand in this compound, right, and we're all just looking at each other, just trying to size each other up, and then you don't know who's SAS and who's not. Yeah. So there was this guy standing. He was just a truck driver, And he was standing, he was wearing a pair of combat trousers, and I was thinking, I was like, immediately I made all these images of how tough he was going to be. And he was just the guy that was driving us to the next place. And then the next guy comes out, and I'm like, oh, is this the SAS guy or whatever? And then those 4 guys who we know now, they just walked out, and then they're all dressed in black, and I was like, this must be it. And that was it, bang. They didn't know who we were, they knew nothing about us, and we knew nothing about them. So they just had to find things out on the fly. And that was interesting, you know, it was just the unknown. Like, I thought it was going to be like a TV show in terms of, I thought it was going to be like, here's where you go next, you're going to go and do this run, and then we're going to film it. It was literally like a Big Brother scenario where they just had cameras on the wall. You never seen the camera crews, you never seen any of the production crew. We were just locked in this compound with these SAS guys, and they kept in character every minute of every day, and they just tortured us from minute to minute. And then and it just didn't stop. There was no end to it. It was just like, it was a weird situation. I just thought there was going to be more, I didn't think it would be as real as that, you know what I mean? Yeah. Just when, like, stuff like that I wasn't prepared for, really, and which is interesting.
What did you first make of, you know, the whole stuff? Because on site, I mean, like, the main leader is Ant Middleton. Obviously, he kind of leads it all, and he's terrifying, you know. Yeah. He shouts at you. He's got, you know, a kind of caveman look to him. What did you first make of all the stuff?
I thought when we saw the staff, it was like, obviously they're all like a little bit older, you know. They've always like ex-special forces, so they've served, and they're all quite chunky guys, you know. It seems to go with the territory to a certain extent, and I was just thinking, all right, well, they look the part in that, but they're probably retired now, and they probably let themselves go, and they maybe just lift weights and stuff now. So we started running, and honestly, like, Foxy, who's the biggest one of the lot, I was thinking, well, if I go running, there's no way he's outrunning me. I don't care what we're doing. Yeah. And he just took off, and he took off up the mountain on wheels, Penafan. I think it's the highest mountain on wheels or whatever, one of them, in the Brecon Beacons. And, like, he just did not stop. And he's a big dude, like, strong, like, chunky guy, 6'2" or 3" or whatever. And he just took off. And they were all like that. They were all incredibly fit. Like, scary to think what they would have been like, you know, I suppose, not out of their peak or whatever, but like on the job at the time, it must have been like, it's a different, like a total elite at what they were doing. They were like, you know, 10th degree black belt at that particular art. They were amazing at it.
Yeah. Throughout the course, they had someone on the inside, and near the end, you know, they kind of brought him in, and they tried to basically get him to talk the weak ones out of it, and you know, you were eating dinner with him, he was trying to kind of talk you out of it. What was going through your head? Did you kind of suspect he was inside, or did you just kind of think he was trying to, you know, best you and trying to get rid of you?
Yeah, I suspected he was trying to play a few mind games. Yeah. But to be honest with you, the funny thing about Ross was that the first day, he was the first guy I spoke to coming off the truck, and he was sitting beside me, and he took the hood off, and I was like, oh, how's it going? I'm Ryan. He said, I'm Ross. What do you do? And he went, and then straight away he was like a bit coy about it. He was like, oh, I'm working the city, I'm working investment or something. It didn't ring true, but I didn't immediately think, oh, he's a mole. But then he didn't speak to me at all. I mean, didn't say a word to me from that initial conversation, probably right through till it must have been the 4th or 5th day when there was only a few people left. And then he comes out and he starts asking me loads of questions, like, and it was all day. It was like, how are you feeling? You feeling okay? And I'm like, it's so weird. I thought he was losing the plot, because a couple of guys were losing the plot a little bit, just out of exhaustion. And I thought he was losing the plot. I was like, why is he starting to talk to me and ask me all these questions? I was thinking, is he feeling really weak, and is he looking to know, kind of like, oh, are you feeling the same way too? And I honestly was feeling fine, so I was like, I feel okay, to be honest. Like, I can't complain. I feel a bit tired, but I didn't feel bad, and that was funny. Like, the stuff like that, the unknown was the best part of that show, or that experience, because, you know, like, if I said to you, right, we're gonna go running, we're gonna do 5 miles, it's gonna be from here to there, you could like make a plan in your head of how much to invest in that. But they would just do things like wake you up at 3 a.m. with a flashbang. You'd be outside, right, and it take you 60 seconds to get ready, so you're just chucking on all this wet gear, you're standing outside jogging on the spot, and then they would never say, we're going to do this, they would just do it. They would just start running, and you'd have to just catch them. And they might run for 5 hours, or they might run for 500 meters, you didn't know. And then they would do things like, they would just stop in the middle of nowhere, and they would point up at the top of this hill, and they would say, right, first, like, pays to be a winner, first one there and back. And like, that stuff would just happen all the time, so you were always on the edge of, you never could relax, because you never knew if it was the end of a run, or if it was the end of a sprint, or that constant feeling of like, oh, this isn't the end, we're going to have to do something else now. Like when they took us into the water to do the dives and stuff, And so he did that dive that you see on TV where you go backwards. Yeah. That wasn't so bad. But the thing that's hard to get across on TV is that like we did that. We had no sleep, no food, no breakfast, no nothing. They just hood you, take you off into the middle of the dark, and the sun's coming up, and you can see the sea, so you know roughly it's going to be in the sea. And they just put us in a boat. Still haven't said anything to us yet. Still haven't said, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. The boat comes around the cove, and you see this diving board, like sort of scaffolding they've set up, and you're thinking, right, we're going to have to dive off that. But again, like there's no like safety talk or anything, you know. There's nothing like, oh, here's what you're going to do, here's what will happen if literally Ant just runs up the top of it. He goes, okay lads, here's what we're going to do. He walked off to the back of this and he just backward dived, and he got up, he came out of the water, swam and climbed back up, and he went, right, you're next. So we all did that a couple of times. Then we all thought we were done because we were freezing, like properly shivering. And he just climbs up like the cliff, and I was looking at the cliff, I was thinking, are we even going to be able to climb this? It was like properly just a rock face. So we climb up top of the cliff, and it's about 12 meters at this point. And he gets to the top of this cliff, and I'm wondering what's going to happen next. And he just points at me, and he went, right, run and jump off the cliff into the sea. And he brought me over. I was the first one up, and he says, look at them, see them rocks? Clear those rocks. That was it. No instruction. No, here, do this, do that. So I just had to just take off and jump it. Stuff like that, you know, was like quite, you never knew, like it was always that unknown. And that's what beat most of the guys. It beat them that they didn't know how hard this was going to be. Whereas in my head, I was just thinking, right, this is just one more push-up. If you break it down into tiny little bits, it's just one more lap of like, of this hill or whatever. You know, if you think about it, oh, this is going to go on for 5 hours. I'm going to do 1,000 more push-ups today. That's what gets you. It's the end game that gets you. Whereas if you just think about the present moment and just go, okay, it's just a push-up. It's just a run. It's just one foot in front of the other. It's just carrying somebody, you know.
I remember watching that where you guys were climbing the rock face, and I was sitting there thinking, that's dangerous. Like, surely there's somebody at the bottom. Why aren't they harnessed up or things like that?
When he goes at the top of the cliff, they didn't. I don't know why they didn't show the higher one, because it's way better. It was a way better scene. But like Foxy was. I was talking to Foxy a couple of weeks back, right? And he was saying that whenever they were scoping out the location, that that cliff where we run and jump, he said the production crew wanted to see them do it to know that it was doable. So him and Ant get to the top of the cliff, and they're up there. He said they were up there for 45 minutes trying to decide who was going to do the jump because they didn't want to do it. They were looking. Foxy said to me, he said I got to the top, and he was like, "Fuck, that looks pretty high, to be honest." And so it's funny hearing like the human side of them. You know, they're not just complete machines. They get scared too. They just overcome it. But you would think that there would be more. Like I could legitimately died on top of that cliff. There's no doubt, because like there was no platform or anything. It was just a cliff face with like dirt on it. That was it. But you know when you're like as if you're setting up for a long jump. So you get to the top of this cliff face, right? And I set up for like a long jump. Do you know when you want to make sure your foot hits the end, which is the end of the cliff, and it's 12 meter drop into rocks. So you want to make sure you hit this end. So I walked up to it 3 times. I was like 1, 2, 3, and I kept missing the end of the cliff just from nerves and cold and stuff, and everybody watching. And I was the first guy to go. And eventually I just took off and ran. I got to the end and I missed the step, and I couldn't jump, so I just kind of like pushed myself off the edge. And I was thinking, I'm done here, like. And apparently, that was the only time the guys told me, because I couldn't see it, but they said that was the first time they seen him being nervous because he ran to the edge of the cliff to see if I'd made it. The stuff like that's pretty funny, like, in hindsight.
Any point during the whole course that you kind of thought, okay, this is enough for me, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore? Any point where you were kind of close to giving up and quitting?
Like, looking back, it would be easy to say, nah, I just nailed it, but that's not true. Like, I think
that's what it looked like. I'll say that.
No, it's just not like that. It was more like I've got a good poker face, you know. I got comes from martial arts, you know. When you get hurt and stuff, you can't like show it. But on the second night, which was probably surprising, the second night I went to bed and I distinctly remember it was just like a shitty little camp bed and I was wrecked. And I'm thinking, what am I doing this for? Like, what the fuck am I actually doing? I'm getting no money. I'm not joining the SAS. Like I could just go home to my girlfriend and go home to bed and get some food and then be in a warm house. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm just thinking I'm doing this pointless exercise. And that was on the second night. But honestly, after that, like as I went on, I just enjoyed it more and more. And coming towards the end, I could have like it was weird because I felt like I could have stayed for as long as that. Once I got into a groove, the first 2 days were hard, and once I got into a groove, it was like I wouldn't have stopped. You know, unless they pinned me. There was nothing I was going to stop for. Like there was nothing that they could have made me do, because every day you do something new, you gain a little bit more confidence in yourself that you can achieve a little bit more, and that's probably the best thing about it is like one of the mornings they open up wakes up some ungodly hour straight out into the middle of the exercise yard, and we're all standing jogging on the spot, and there's a river behind, and I hadn't really looked at it yet, but it was all nettles and overgrown and shit, right? And they just pointed at the river. As soon as the last man came out of the changing rooms and stood outside, they pointed at the river and they said, "First man in the river." So I was like, right. So I just dived over this barbed wire fence, rolled down through the nettles, got in the river, and they said, like, submerge yourself so you're underneath the water, and you have to crawl through this tunnel. Crawl through the tunnel, you cut the ribbons from all the rocks and stuff, you get up the far side and they make you do it again and again and again and again, and then you're completely soaked to the skin, and then they would just make you run for 2 hours. Yeah. And then they got us back into the barracks and they had breakfast, which was the first time we had proper breakfast. And I remember distinctly I had this little mess tin, and I had 3 Weetabix in it, and I put milk and sugar on. I was like, this is amazing, some carbs, like I just needed that. And I had the first bite inside my mouth, I hadn't even swallowed it, and they were like, back outside. So you're back outside, Weetabix in your mouth, like try not to choke. But getting through all that kind of stuff, it gives you like, every day you just felt like, well, what are they going to do now? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I've jumped off the cliff, I've been interrogated by dogs, I've done all your running, I've done all your things that were meant to break me. What are you going to do now? That was why I felt like, I was like, what's the point in going home now? I've already achieved so much, why would I leave, you know? Yeah. If that makes sense.
Was there any questions, as you said, you were on a boat, nobody knew what was happening. Could you just say, oh, what are we doing? Could you speak to the other members saying like that? Or it was just...
We would say things to each other, but not in front of the staff and that. You just stay quiet. Yeah. 'Cause that's part of it, is just like, they want to see that like unwavering ability to do stuff without question, just being able to make decisions on that minute and be sure in your decision. That's really the key. It's like, you have to back yourself. So when you say, right, we're going to go this way, if you're reading maps or whatever, you back yourself and say, right, that's it. Yeah. That's probably the hardest thing about it, was decision making under pressure. That's really what it was. It was just like high pressure decision making, in a very similar way to what an MMA fight is. Yeah.
As you said, you weren't going to quit unless you were kind of binned and kicked off the course. While you're in that assembly hall and they're saying, you're gone, I imagine that was extremely tense and extremely nervous. What was that like?
It was tense, because you're standing there and part of you, to be totally honest, is thinking, maybe if they just bin me, I can go home, but like not in shame. Yeah. I just didn't want to quit. I couldn't quit and come back to like this gym. All my students and all my friends and all the fighters around here would just think, oh, what a dickhead. And there'd be no way to describe how tough it was to them. So there was a social pressure and a personal pressure not to quit. And then when you're standing in that lineup, it's like, just a weird situation, because it's so quiet. Like, it's only you and the DS. There's no cameraman, there's no crew. Yeah. So you're just looking, and it's a very real, becomes almost very real, very quick. But I didn't really think I was going to leave, because I just knew that I'd done enough in my own head. Like, I knew I never came first in any race because I didn't want to stand out. Yeah. So but when doing so, I never actually pushed my body completely 100%. Yeah. I was always pushing hard, but I was saving a little bit. Yeah. So then coming down the stretch in the later parts of this course, I had loads of energy left and I was able to stick at it, that kind of way. So I knew to stay. I always measured it like the top 20%. I was going to be in that no matter what. Yeah. So like if I was outside that, I would just measure the number of men, take the percentage, and go, right, I need to be in that. I need to be 5th, 6th, 7th, whatever it was. I would just get to that space and I would stay there. I wouldn't go any further or any less. Yeah.
In the final episode, there was a moment where you stood up against the wall and a man called the umpire was brought in. I know you can't say much about him, but do you remember his face? I imagine it's kind of stuck in the back of your head.
You know what it is? He's funny because he's like 6 foot, whatever. He's very big dude, and he's got a very unique voice. Yeah. And
a voice that if you heard.
You would not forget any of those interrogators. I've met 2 of them since, and a couple of times actually. You'll not forget their personalities. They're professional interrogators. That is their job. They go to Iraq and Afghanistan and interrogate people, and then they interrogate Special Forces members as part of their training. So they're like, it's hard to describe, but they're like black belt. Yeah. At that, very, very, very tricky people, and seeing the umpire and stuff, it was a weird situation because you knew from the very start if you seen him, it was the end of the process. Yeah. And I knew I'd been in there like 22, 23 hours. I was trying to count the hours, but like I knew I'd been roughly over 22 hours at least. I knew it was like after midday on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I've been on the run for 24 hours, and I've been locked up for like 22 hours. So I was thinking it's got to be near the end here at some point. And yeah, when I seen him, it was just that kind of, it was weird because they hit me in reverse, because the interrogations were building and building and building, and were getting more and more intense, and the stress positions were getting more and more intense. And I knew that certain people had dropped off. I wasn't 100% sure here, but I knew there was only a couple of people left because I could just feel it in the room.
Yeah.
And then they really roughed me up before that last bit. They like, cause you see when you're wearing these little shitty trainers that are like the kind of like slippers, and you're freezing, like so cold. It's hard to describe. If you lie on concrete for 6 hours, you start to shiver, and it's just your bare skin. So anyway, they start roughing you up, and like you're blindfolded, but they're running you up and down steps and stuff. So you're tripping and falling, and like they're throwing you up around and roughing you up basically. And they sprinted me across the yard. But you ever tried to sprint with your eyes closed? No. And they're forcing you. You're having to sprint, and you don't know where the ground is, so you're just sprinting in darkness. You know what I mean? And they ran me against this wall, and I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be the worst interrogation. So I psyched myself up. I was like getting ready. I'm like, all right, okay. I knew it was near the end. I was thinking, last interrogation, I'm going to be ready for this. They pull the hood off, and the first thing gets you is the light, because you haven't seen light in 4 or 5 hours at all, and the light shining bright in your eye. And then he was there, and it hit me in reverse. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'd psyched myself up for this big fight I was going to have, like mentally, and then he was there. It's a really funny situation. I mean, crying on national TV is probably not high up there on my list of aspirations, but then it is what it is.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stuck out to me was, I think it was when you first got dragged into that room, and you got the hood pulled off, and you had 2 men screaming in your face, and you just kind of, you can't had your eyes shut, and it kind of seemed like you were just kind of trying to ignore it. What was that like to kind of, as soon as your hood's pulled off, to just have 2 men screaming in your face? What was that whole experience like?
It's weird because that wasn't actually the hardest bit for me. Like the screaming in your face bit was a bit harder. It was a bit easier to comprehend than the actual tactical questioning, where they actually ask you things and try and catch you out. When the screaming in your face, it's almost like, well, you're screaming in my face. It's like, it's not that hard to deal with. But the thing that you don't see is that, like, they put us in a van, like they tied us behind our backs, right, hooded us, put us in the van with no seats or anything in it, and then they just rallied around for like 30 minutes in this van, and you were slamming like pinballs all over, so you're bashed up anyway from just being in the back of this van. They roll you out, chest positions for a couple of hours, and then they started dragging me on my bum, like through this room. I remember getting dragged over a step and getting dragged and then through into that corner, and then they stripped the thing off. And these 2 guys were screaming at me, and I was just thinking, well, like I was just trying to work out who they were, what their faces were, what they were wearing, like just trying to keep your mind occupied with other stuff, other than the fact that you're a bit scared shitless. But like, if you try and concentrate on the important details, like who they were, because I knew I'd see them again. They were hooded up, but you could make out roughly who they were, and I was trying to work out did I know them, and stuff like that. And then I knew I only had to give away my name, so I just waited for them to stop shouting, and I was like, my name's Ryan, Ryan Roddy, and what else are they going to do? As long as you keep that in your head, like, what are they going to do? Whereas I think some other guys that maybe haven't had the experience of like fighting for a living probably haven't dealt with confrontation in quite the same way, because it's a lot for being a TV show. It was very real and it was scary, but going to weigh-ins and the whole like 12-week build up to a fight with one guy, and you're squaring off against each other. I've already dealt with that kind of confrontation before, so it wasn't that foreign to me.
Was during the course, did you always have in the back of your mind this is a TV show, or was the point where it was 100% real to you and you kind of thought that there's, you're actually in this?
Once you realise that there's no the medical team didn't exist, and you realise that nobody cares if you fall over and bash your face or wreck your knee, and there's no end to it. Do you know what I mean? Like whenever they said, "Oh, let's just sprint up and down this hill," that would just happen for 3 hours. And like I was legitimately thinking I might die here at one point. I remember going on the hill thinking my heart could just stop. Because there's no way I could push any harder than this. And I'd already reached my limit by like 7 a.m. that morning, and I thought, this is my limit. I'm not going to be able to do another step. And I was still going, I think it was like at lunchtime, I was still doing the exact same thing that I thought I was broken on at 7. And you realise like they don't care. They don't care how tired you are, and you're like unbelievably wrecked. Your feet are all just blood. Like my socks were just a bloody mess every day. So you're having to put your socks and shoes on, they just stick into your skin. It's just open wounds everywhere. And and there's no like. I just thought there would be more like health and safety saying, "Oh, you can't do that." Like whenever this, I was getting interrogated, right, and this dog, they pulled the dog in, and you could hear the dogs barking from like ages away, but you're covered in the hood, and the hood's wet as well, so they soaked us, and you're sitting, and you couldn't really breathe that well. Anyway, you're on your knees, and it's like all completely soaked, and then the dog bark is closer and closer and closer and closer. And I'm thinking, they're not going to put dogs on us, like it's a TV show at the end of the day, right? But your adrenaline's still up, and I can hear the dog comes into the room, and it's going mental. Yeah. And then they just, like, I could smell the dog's breath right next to my face through the hood, and they pull this thing off, and all the SAS guys are holding me back by the arm, and there's two other guys holding the dog back, and the dog's this far away from me like this. And I was like, I'm not going to show them I'm scared. I was scared. Like, well, I was like, I'm not going to show them I'm scared. So I just looked at the dog, like, looked it in the eye as hard as I could. Didn't try not to blink. But at that point, I was thinking, is nobody fucking watching? Is anybody else seeing this? Like, is there any need for this dog to be barking in my face, like, this far away? It was, like, so close I could smell him. I was like, this can't be right. It was like it's some guard dog that it was like stuff like that where you just think, oh, this is actually... Because the physical consequences are quite real. So it becomes real. Almost, you know.
That was one thing I noticed. Them dogs were close. If an inch or two more, and your face would have been mauled off.
That time jumping off the cliff, I could have 100%. I would have just died if I had sllipped. That was it. It's 12 meters in the rocks. What are you gonna do? Like, and not only that, but you're like, it's not like you prep for it. Nobody else did it before me. Even the instructors didn't do the cliff dive bit. So they just told me to jump off this cliff. I've never been in that water before. I don't know how deep it is. I don't know, like, I'm soaked to the skin from doing this little jump, so do you know when you're so soaked that you can't, like, do motor control, like, zip your clothes up or whatever. It was like that cold, and I'm trying to jump off this cliff and wet, everything's soaked, and you're thinking like, oh, this is it, like I'm gonna drown. I'm like, yeah, and you're thinking you're so cold, you're thinking even if I land in there, you got to swim back to the shore, which is about 200 meters. I might not even make it. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. It was hard not to feel like it was real at those points, or getting chased through the woods at night and stuff like that. That was like, there was dogs and stuff. You could hear the dogs, you could see the people, and literally stuff like that. There was no like, there was one guy with an infrared camera sticking with us, but he just stayed as quiet. He just followed us the whole time. But in terms of like, they never briefed us and said, right, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Like, get to this. They literally put us in the back of a Land Rover, told us to bring this, bring that, and then they just dropped us off in a field, and they pointed out a spot which was about 30, 40 kilometers away, and they said, be there, just pointed at it with a piece of grass, and they said there's a red gate or something there. They said, be there by 6 a.m. This is 6 p.m. the night before, and no other instructions. Don't get caught. That was it. So you know what I mean? Stuff like that where like you're making your own decisions. You're in the middle of the woods in Wales. Like there's no track. It wasn't like a TV show. There wasn't like, oh, run down there and then run over here. It was just like, it was very much like, we're chasing you, don't get caught, and that's it.
I mean, that face must have been, I don't fancy that. It must have been terrifying. You had one guy on your team as well who actually pulled out in the last phase while he was lying down in the room, and he was exhausted. He just didn't want to do it anymore. He was lying down, saying he couldn't go on. You said you'd have to carry him. You'd rather carry than let him go. What was that like? I imagine that was a hindrance to use, because he was kind of you and Freddie were obviously kind of ready to go, but he was kind of already broken and things like that. What was that like?
It was tricky, because like I knew right from the off, right before we left, I knew that it wasn't right and wasn't really able to. I was not fully confident he was going to complete, just because he was so wrecked, as we all were, but he seemed to be a bit further down the track than us. And like when you're that tired and that hungry, you make like stupid mistakes, like just little silly things. And he didn't bring his coat with him, so it got till about midnight, so it was really dark, starts to get cold, but and like he didn't bring his coat, and he was already fucked, you know what I mean? So he didn't have his coat, we didn't have any food, we didn't have any water to give him. There's no way we could boost him up. So like I had to give him my coat, right? And I'm telling you, it was a cold night. Like, you think it's the summertime and stuff, but it was just freezing because you're only wearing like a t-shirt all night, and you're climbing through like mud and water and shit. Like it was like 8 hours through the night, you're freezing, and giving him your coat and stuff. But at the same time, that's the if you all these things, like the same as anything in life, it all depends what you make of it. It's not what happens, it's not what you make of it. So you could easily turn around and say, oh, what a hindrance. But I was like, in my mind, it was more like I was trying to make the best of it and say, right, well, here's my chance to like to help somebody out, and not in some sort of heroic way, but just to say, like, oh, well, I can like help him out. So then maybe tomorrow I might be the guy that's fucked up, and he should help me. Because it's not so much a test of. It wasn't an individual test. It wasn't a race to the finish. It was a teamwork exercise. And so so if one of your teammates is fucked up, I mean, if you were at war and somebody got shot, what are you gonna do? Get pissed off that he got shot? It's just the reality. You just gotta deal with it. Yeah. It was the same as stuff like when they made us jump in the sea or jump in the rivers or whatever. For me, it was like, instead of me thinking, oh, this is shit, I was like, tried to embrace it. Everything we did, I was like, oh, well, now I'm getting an ice bath. You know what I mean? Or you know, like stuff like that where like you could look at it as really shit, but if you look at it, change the perspective a little bit, it gets a lot easier. And stuff like when we were getting chased through the night, like I genuinely enjoyed that. It was like the best game of hide and seek you ever played, because you're hiding in the woods and the SAS are chasing you, and you're like, and it was pretty grim in terms of fitness and stuff, but like at the same time, like when else are you gonna get this?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know, you can, like, why would you not enjoy that? For me, I was just like having a great time. It hurt physically, but mentally I was like, oh, this is class. Like getting on the run from the SAS for 24 hours, trying not to get caught. I couldn't think of anything better really at the time.
I think the thing that most out to me during that phase is the fact that it's such a massive open space. If there's somebody that night decides to go on a rampage and stumbles across you guys and thinks, oh, what are they doing at this time? And you know, there's no kind of protection around you, is there? So it kind of just it could all go wrong. Another thing that stood out to me about you is when they offered you a phone call home, and Ant actually said, you know, on camera, he said the reason we're doing this is because if they phone home, they're gonna want to go home more. And he asked you, and you said the exact same thing he just said. Did you know, you know? Did you know that was why they were doing it, or did you think they were giving you a real
it's easy to look back and say, oh, I knew what they needed. It wasn't like that at all. It was just that you can only play the cards you're dealt. So whenever they said this or that, you just had to deal with it off the cuff. It was always a surprise. But I think, like, to sort of preface that, like, so right up before that, we did like a load of shit that I can't remember exactly what we did the night before, but it was nighttime and they fed us like cake for the first time, and because you're so hungry, we just ate like everything, right? We had every bit of cake they had. I just filled my belly. You didn't know when you're going to eat again. And you know, when you're like so full and so tired and ready to sleep, and as soon as we were just finished the last bit of cake, and they were like, right, lads, come outside, and we were thinking, no, go for another run, I'm so full. And then they marched us off into this room with a load of air beds, right? This is like, they didn't show this I don't think they showed this in the show, right? I don't think so. So marched them, loads of air beds, and they have these massive industrial heaters outside of the room. It's a tiny little room, really. We could just about fit in it. And they put a little tiny TV at the corner of the room, and they said, right, lads, this is 2 minutes. They just walked us in, bang, lie down, and said, don't touch the floor. You're not allowed to come off these air beds at all. You've got to look at this camera, and you've got to tell us how many people are in the video. What it was a video of you know, like a ferry or like a ship where they take off the containers. Right. It was just a loop of these containers getting took off a ship and put in a lorry and taken away. Right. But all these different. But it was like a 20-minute loop. And he said, right, you've all got to remember, tell me how many containers were taken off, what color they were, how many people are in the video, how many times each container took, all these different fucking instructions. So you're sitting there, been up for 20 hours, so tired. You're lying there on this airbed with these heaters on all your warm kit on, because they told us to wear a kit. We thought we were going outside. So we're all wearing full kit. And then we have to sit and study this video. And they made me team leader, so I had to tell everybody what to watch. I was like, okay, you watch the people. And people were falling asleep. We were like slapping them awake. This went on for about 3 hours. Eventually it ends, right? Torture, worse than running. We all get let out with our hoods back on. And we have to go, when you get let out in a group, they go shoulder to shoulder. So you walk with your hands on the shoulder and you walk out. And then in the middle of this, I just got dragged out of the line. Like, obviously you can't see what's happening. I got dragged out, and then I sat down. They just pushed me into a chair, and then took the hood off. And that's what you see on TV is the bit where Ollie's sitting there and he's asking me the question, right? But like, it's hard to get across all the shit that went on before that. So you're already mentally like in a complete state already. You're just mentally fatigued, you're barely awake, and then there's all this chocolate and sweets and stuff. So immediately I was just like, oh, something's not right here, and there's a phone, and I just didn't feel right to me. I was like, oh, obviously it's another test, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whenever he said, do you want to call home, do you want some chocolate, I was like, nah. I just thought they were just testing me, do you know what I mean? I didn't actually genuinely think they were going to let people call home. Then when I watched the show back, I seen these other guys talking to their mums and stuff. And maybe looking back, maybe it would have been nice to talk to my girlfriend or my family. It was funny like that, you know, like it was just a funny situation. Look, when you watch it back, it probably makes me look quite better than I actually was, because I just thought it was a trick, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to take this trick.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was so out of character for them to be nice to you as well, and they were being like quite nice and cordial, and I was thinking, oh, this is like some sort of mind fuck here.
Yeah.
That was all I was thinking.
And they did that a few times where they kind of said, okay, here's some biscuits, have this and that, and then they said, how many people are in this van, things like that. Did you, while you were, I can't remember exactly when they done it, but while you were they were treating you nice, did you always have in the back of your head something's wrong here? Did you always?
Every time, because they were so like, what I didn't understand was how anybody would not think it was a trick. Like, how would you not see that coming, right? First off, we didn't have any hot drinks from the minute we got there. It was just water from a tap. That was it, just tepid water. From the minute we got there until the minute we left, and then on the day that we got picked up from our 24 hours of being on the run, they gave us tea and biscuits.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
So but I was hammering them into me, because I knew that was going to be our last meal. I knew we were getting picked up to get interrogated. I knew it was 24 hours of no food after that. And we already had 24 hours of no food. That was the only bit of food we had, so I was just hammering biscuits in, trying to get some calories on board. And and then, so like, looking from the outside, it might look like, oh, what a cool trick, but for us it was just like, oh, we're getting fucked up here.
Yeah.
If they were doing something nice, you knew it was for a reason.
Yeah.
You knew it was for a bad reason. So anytime something nice happened, you were like, oh, I don't want to know what happens next. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's quite funny.
Do you like ginger nuts, the biscuits? That's what they give you, isn't it?
Yeah, ginger nuts are alright, yeah.
Like
ginger nuts are alright. What else did they give us? Something else, can't remember. Like, could have been like ginger nuts and rich tea, something like that.
Rich tea.
You're not a fan of rich tea? Oh, you are a fan of rich tea? So, yeah. Ginger nuts, they're alright. Honestly, when you're that hungry, I would have ate anything at that point.
Yeah. When you're the final phase, when you're lying in that room, blindfolded, just on your back or sitting up at points, I imagine you must be going insane. Was there any point where you kind of started to lose your mind and you were thinking?
I lost the plot a few times, because but that's what they make it that way. It's like it's a system that's been tried and tested on probably hundreds of thousands of people at this point. So it's not like, oh, I'm not immune to interrogation. Nobody is. But the stress positions it was incredibly difficult to concentrate. That was the hard part, right? So like, even you would think the one when you're lying on your back would be a bit of a break or something, it's like, oh, I've been on my feet all day. But when you lie on your back, you had to do stuff like you had to hold your feet together, like touching each other, and like that seems like nothing right now, right? See, 3 hours deep, and you're trying to keep your toes together, but it's just not possible. Like, even now doing it, I can remember the pain I had in there. These two muscles like felt like they were never going to stop hurting after that. And little things like that where you're just like, come on, like. It was the pressure of concentrating on those for so long that just wound you up, because like you were just having to concentrate on silly stuff like holding your back up straight when you're sitting cross-legged, and you would just forget and you would slouch, and somebody come and knee in the back, you're like, oh. And that constant pressure, and then probably the hardest part for me was not being able to see, because when you get hooded, like if I put a blindfold over you, you would see like bits of light coming in, but when they hood you and put the plastic goggles over, there's no light. So after 4 or 5 hours or however long you're in there, you forget for me, what happened to me was I forgot what it was like to have your eyes open or closed. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So when you shut your eyes and it's dark, when you open your eyes, it's usually something there. It was like being blind, because you just don't see anything. So you open your eyes and shut your eyes and it's the same image. Yeah. So you start seeing things in lieu of not having light. Yeah. And you start losing the plot of where you're at in space. So have you ever woken up in bed and been like not quite sure what way you're lying? You haven't opened your eyes yet and you're not sure where you are. Yeah. That's what it's like. So when I remember standing up against the wall and they're playing all this fucking crazy music in my ear and the blindfold was on. I've been there for ages and I could barely hold my shoulders were burning, and I just fell over. But I fell over like a statue, because I didn't know where the wall was. So I fell over and I just landed, bump. And I was like, oh, I forgot that I was standing up, if you know what I mean? Yeah. Stuff like that was just funny. It was like hilarious looking back at the time. I was thinking, this is shit. Yeah. Absolutely shit.
Presumably there was, you know, every single little sound kind of you heard it times 10. You know, at one point John Calloway tried to take his mask off and somebody sprinted over. Was the noises you were hearing, you know, people running out, shouting and things like that, was that like kind of, was that louder, you know, louder than you would hear it normally, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Massively. So like, if they weren't playing like ridiculously loud techno music, they would like, it would be ultimate silence, and you'd be trying to work out, you'd be trying to get a sense of if anybody else was in the room, because you know when we all had to pee and stuff, like they didn't take the blindfold off, they would march outside and they would say, right, you're standing against the wall, pee. But for all I knew, I was peeing in front of like the whole crew. You know what I mean? I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. And like, I didn't know if I was peeing against anything. So you'd be standing there just like pee, and they would hold you like this against the wall. And so you would try and get a sense of, you would look for anything to help you out. Like, I wonder, is like John Calloway sitting there, is Freddie sitting there, or am I on my own? Or you know what I mean? Or was there just four SAS guys drinking tea over there? So every wee noise, you were starting to like imagine what it could be. But that was probably worse. Then they would do things like, it'd be complete silence for maybe half an hour, and then they would come over and drop a set of ladders in front of you. But the shock of the sound then, so it's like, so you're always waiting for like the next thing, you know. Or one of the worst ones for me is, I don't know who it was, but maybe it was all of them, but they would come over and breathe in your ear out of nowhere. So they'd sneak up on you and stand behind you, and you'd feel this presence behind you, but you couldn't feel it yet, or you couldn't see it or anything, obviously. And then they would do things like just come up and breathe in your ear out of nowhere. You wouldn't ever hear them coming. They would just be breathing in your ear. Stuff like that was like, was hard just to concentrate non-stop. And you're also trying to think of what you're going to say in the next interrogation, and you're trying to back up your story and all these different things. A lot going on.
I imagine as an MMA fighter who lives and breathes fighting, your instincts probably, you know, say if someone jumps out on you, so probably to punch them in the face. Was there any point where, you know, someone's breathing down your neck and you kind of were twitching to just throw an elbow or anything?
Nah, do you know, like, you would think that. That's like a bit of a maybe misconception, or at least for me, because I think what martial arts gives you is the ability not to hit. Do you know what I mean? So I think the best thing about it is that, like, if somebody, oftentimes I think the major problem with confrontation is that the person hasn't got the skill set to deal with it, so they can't slow it down. So whenever they get into a confrontational situation, it's fight or flight. Whereas a fighter or a martial artist is meant to live in that middle ground between fight and flight, where they don't have to fight, and they don't have to flight, they have to relax. You know, and I think that's why, like, for instance, kids that come in here and train, I've trained a lot of kids in here, and like, the best thing about it for them is that it gives them the opportunity not to fight. You know what I mean? So they have that thing where they know enough to know, right, I've been in enough fights in the gym, I've been in enough sparring to know that I don't have to fight right now. I can just take a step back and have a think about it, you know. And I think that helped me a lot. Whereas I think a lot of other guys, they had that, like, maybe because they hadn't had the same background I had, they were a bit more like, they took the aggression personally, you know. Whereas when you know it's a test, you know you're going to fail. It's just as much of a failure to fail by lashing back at them than it is to fail just by quitting and handing your armband, or just not being able to do a sprint or something. It's the exact same idea. You're still quitting. You're quitting mentally when you break. You know what I mean? You know, when you see a fighter lose the plot mentally, and they just come out swinging. And it's the same guy was amazing in the gym the week before, and then he comes out and he gasses in the first round, and then a mediocre fighter who's just been training a little bit longer takes him out in the second round, just because they got that little bit more about them, you know.
When you said earlier that you knew from the start that when you saw the umpire's face again, it was over. After that, you know, you kind of sit and talked about it, and then you walked out of the compound with Freddie. I imagine you still had it in the back of your head, something's going to happen here.
It was only, I always thought me and Freddie were walking with our backpacks on, and we were like, I was just thinking like, oh, is this like, you're not genuinely sure it's done yet, until we reached the compound gates and we got out. And then it was like a real feeling of sadness, actually. Do you know when you've had this thing where it's a really intense situation and it's almost like, oh, it's over now, you know? It was a bit of a downer, actually, finishing it. In a really weird way, unexpected way.
So that's training 3 months and then finishing the fight in 50 seconds.
Exactly, So that little, like, I think with the fight, there's basically 3 stages to a fight. At least the time after a fight. So you got like, the initial reaction to whatever it was, whether it was extreme elation or extreme sadness or extreme defeat or whatever. And then you've got the day after, which is usually a Sunday, where it's like the weight of the world is off your shoulders for a day. You don't have to diet, you don't have to think about fighting, you don't have to do anything, and it's like you got that. You almost feel like you're floating on air. And then you got the Monday where like I wouldn't say the pressure of fighting, but it comes back to you. We're like, all right, now I need that next thing.
Yeah.
And it was like that. It was like initially I was like, oh, I'm out of this thing, and then I was like, oh, what am I going to do now? You know, like the night, literally that night, I was like, oh, I wish I was still doing the SAS stuff. Which is funny.
Onto your fighting career, you started first 5 fights, you went 5-0 with 3 submissions and 2 TKOs, and then you fought your biggest fight at that time was Paul Redmond, Cage Warriors 51, and even first round, you know, both guys scored a few shots, and then a few takedowns exchanged, and then second round you both shot in for a takedown, you ended up on top, and then Paul got up, took you down, and ended up getting a hold. What was that like, you know, losing on a stage like Cage Warriors, you know, and you went in as a slight favourite as well? It was kind of like, you know, you were not expected to lose. What was that whole experience like before and afterwards?
Before I wasn't overly nervous or concerned about the fight. Not looking over Paul at all. It was just that I felt like I was like 22 or 21. And I felt invincible. I was 5-0, and you're at that age where like you don't really know, you haven't really got a sense of your own fallibility yet. You know, you just think you're infallible, and you know, I wasn't like thinking about the other guy. You know, it wouldn't matter who it was. And then it comes crashing back down when you get that loss. It was like a slow mo, you know, like when he twisted my foot, and I heard it crack twice, and then when it snapped, I was like, it was all happening in slow motion, and like it was just a weird situation where I knew it was done, you know, and I also remember when it twisted, like I couldn't see my foot, but I could see his back, and you know the profile of his shoulders, and if you watch when it gives out, it goes crack crack, and then I could feel crunch crunch. And then bang, and I just felt his shoulders, it give way, you know, and you're trying to bend a branch and it snaps. I could see his shoulders give way, and I was like, oh, my foot's facing the wrong way. And no pain yet, but I just remember that, looking at my foot, and then just thinking about what I was going to say to my parents and coaches, and probably more thinking about what other people thought of it, you know. That probably shows my immaturity, but thinking about other people's, I wasn't even thinking about like, oh, how injured I am or losing. It was a really weird one where the pain didn't kick in for like 30 minutes, and then I got dropped out of the ambulance, and that's when the pain kicked in. The guy dropped me. Do you know what it was, right? Some of my cornermen were there, and they were trying to lift me into the ambulance, and he was like, oh no, we'll do it. The 2 paramedics were two older guys, in all fairness to them, and they were lifting me on top of a wheelchair, and the wheelchair, and then one of them slipped, and my foot hit the floor, and that's when the pain kicked in, and it hurt like every day for probably like 6 months after that. And then afterwards, after the fight, just disappointed in myself, you know what I mean? Like just a real downer for probably a couple of weeks where I was just really down, and then that was before I really knew the extent of the injury as well, so I was getting MRIs and stuff, but just really down at that point.
Immediately after, you know, the ref, you tapped the ref, split you up, and you just kind of lay on the floor. Do you remember what was going through your head at that point?
I just wanted to not be in front of loads of people, you know. Just wanted to leave the cage and go back, go backstage and cry, you know, like just like it swallows you up, and you just think, suddenly, because when you're fighting, you forget about the crowd. At least I do. I don't know anybody's there. I just know he's there. I'm there, and the coaches are there, and the referee. Those are like the 5 people. His head coach, my head coach, him, me, and the referees. There's 5 people involved, and nobody else is there for as much as I'm concerned. And then suddenly you get back to reality, and the whole crowd, it feels like there's 10,000 people there, and they're all looking at you. They're probably not, you know, but I just wanted to go, not be there.
You returned almost a year later against Fernando Gonzalez at Cage Warriors Fight Night 9. Won the split decision. What do you make? You know, walk us through that. What do you make of that fight? Are you happy with that?
Well, like happy with it. I mean, they told me like 3 months after he broke my ankle that I went in. This is what happened. Right? I went into the best foot surgeon in Ireland, right? And I got my MRI. I was getting my results, and I was like, so the first question I asked, I didn't even ask him anything else. I was like, so when can I train again? You know, I was just trying to make a plan of attack, like. just planning for the next thing. I was like, when can I train again? And he just looked at me and he said, look, he said, I'm going to be totally honest with you. He said, you'll be lucky if you don't walk without a limp. He said, as far as training is concerned, he said, that's out. He said, you're not going to run again. He says, you're not gonna be able to train. He says, you just got to hope that your foot heals up and not deformed, because you might not be able to walk properly again on your left leg ever. And I was like, oh, this was like in March, so New Year's Eve, March. That got that news, and then I managed to fight again, like about a year, coming on to nearly a year and a bit later. But I was just happy to be back fighting, and fighting against somebody good. For me, it's 5-0, and fighting against in a different country in the Middle East and on a big show. And just happy. I was proud of myself just that I was able to get back on the horse, and not against somebody that was shit, if you know what I mean. Not go and fight somebody that wasn't that good. No, that's probably not somebody that was shit. But like I could have picked a fight against somebody that, a bit of a journeyman or something. You could have picked an easy fight, but I picked an unknown. He's 5-0 from Swedish, from Alexander Gustafsson's team. He's going to be good. Yeah. And that picked me up and made me have a good fight with him. I was happy with the fight in terms of I enjoyed the fight. He's a game opponent and tough opponent. Yeah, he can really fight.
Yeah. And then again, almost a year later, you came back and you fought Lewis Chapman. Early finish, just over 2 minutes into the first round. I imagine that was kind of your first loss and then a really hard fight, and you come into this one and just completely run through an opponent. I imagine that was a massive sense of relief.
I didn't know what it was, but by that stage in my career, I had this sense of of not so much relief anymore, because I took a lot less stock in what other people thought of my career, So I did a lot more for me, and I was just happy. I was happy just to perform. I was more happy with how I performed than anything else. It wasn't like so much that I won or that I won in 2 minutes. It was that I'd done the things that I'd planned for in training. Yeah. The process went well, and the outcome went well, and that's all you need. But then, do you know what was funny about that one was afterwards we were in the Helix. There was a little medical area, and me and him crossed paths in the medical area, and he was busted up. And I had this memory of being in that same medical room but having my ankle busted up. And suddenly I remembered what it was like to be on the bad side of the fight. Yeah. And I felt I just felt a lot of empathy for him. Yeah. Whereas when I was 5-0, I'd beat everybody, and I didn't know what it was like to lose, so I didn't really appreciate the pain and it's a funny sport where you've got to take a step forward, somebody has to take 2 steps back. Yeah. And something I wasn't really aware of until I lost.
Yeah. And then moving on to your most recent fight was obviously a massive fight. 2 of the top UK MMA guys, you and Chris Fishgold, going at it, made for the Cage 18, and that was I think Chris was coming off his first professional loss there. That was a massive fight, and people thought if Chris can get this to the ground as he always does, he's going to win. But the fight was mostly contested on feet and in the clinch. It was a fun fight. We saw a lot out of both you guys. We kind of for the first time saw somebody take Chris into deep waters, and not only take him out of the first round, but actually contest with him and not just stay in there for the point of it. You know what I mean? What was that like? First off, what do you think of the performance? Secondly, before the decision was announced, did you think you'd won that? What was going through your head?
So with the fight, I was excited by fighting him because he's a big name in the UK, and arguably he was 11-0 really, because I would look at his fight in Asia and I wasn't necessarily convinced he lost, to be honest. So I was looking at him as an 11-0 guy with mostly all finishes, I think. And I heard a lot about him, coming up, and you hear stories, gym stories about people, somebody sparred somebody and all this kind of stuff. And I got excited about fighting him. And the fight itself, I felt pretty comfortable in the fight. It was a weird kind of a fight. It was tough, but it was almost we just stalemated each other, Yeah. I couldn't really get my striking off on him, and he couldn't really get his grappling off on me. Yeah. I wasn't overly frightened of the grappling aspect. I'm a brown belt myself, and I know he's obviously high level grappler himself, but it didn't bother me the grappling aspect. It was an annoying fight in that I felt a bit just frustrated by the end of the fight. I felt I couldn't get anything off almost. You know what I mean? And it was just a frustrating fight because a lot of people flew over from Ireland to watch it, and I felt like I put on a boring fight. That was my initial reaction. Like as the bell, I was like, that wasn't a great, that wasn't a very good fight. You know, you weren't happy with your performance. And then my corner were like, I could like, because you look around after a fight and like my corner were like, I think you won a second and third, and his corner were obviously telling him the same thing or whatever. But I didn't honestly feel like, I was more just pissed off at the performance. And then when they put the draw up, I was like, if you watch the, I don't know if you watch the last minute of that where they call out the names and that, and like, and I was just like whenever they call it a draw, I was just like, I don't know what to feel. You know what I mean? Yeah. Nobody plans for a draw. Yeah. You plan for the pissed off feeling of being lost or the really good feeling. You don't sound like a draw. It's like, what? Yeah. Like it wasn't even that I was. It wasn't like when I'm pissed off. It's not so much that I'm pissed off that I hadn't won. It was just I was kind of like, when there's like a draw, you're like, all right, so we did 3 months training and now neither of us are any further forward or backward. Yeah. It's a really weird situation, and like you put all this work in and then nothing's happened. Nothing's happened at all. But in terms of like, did I think I won the fight? I don't know. Like, see, when you leave it that close, you can't argue whether you win, lose, or draw. Like, if it's that close, then a draw is probably fair. But neither me nor him have ever sat and argued, we think we won. You never hear us on social media saying, afterwards we just shook hands. It was a good fight. Obviously we both, like, he's went on to do good things, so you can't be too annoyed that you drew with somebody. I mean, he's finished everybody's fought in the first round since. Yeah. So.
I got a phone call. This is the reason I'm here. I got a phone call from Graham Boylan a few weeks ago, and he said Ryan Roddy is he's got a plan. He's returning to fighting sometime next year. Walk us through that. What's the plan? What's going to go on there?
Yeah, so the plan was basically I changed management to move on with intensity, and I just said to Graham and Ian, I was like, look, I want to fight in September, and that didn't come off just because it just didn't quite work out in terms of matches. And then I was going to fight in this October show. Yeah. I said October, November, December, whatever, wherever it comes up. And I hurt my knee helping Andrew Fisher prepare for Norman Park in ACB. So it just pushed me back a little bit. And then there was talk of a December show, so I was like, right, I'm ready for December. And then he said, look, December's not on, you're going to have to wait till the new year. So that was really what happened. And like, but in terms of the plan is just, as always, is like, I just feel, honestly, at the minute like I could just beat anybody put in front of me. I just feel I'm at that point where I just think everybody's dangerous, but there's nobody that frightens me, Yeah. Like, who's the last guy I fought? Look at the guys I fought, you know what I mean? I've never took an easy fight. Yeah. And obviously the guys that I fought went on to do good things as well, so why shouldn't I go on to do good things?
And obviously since you fought in Cage Warriors, there's been a lot of change, a lot of two new stars have came through, obviously Paddy Pimblett and Chris Fishgold, who you've already fought. What's anybody in mind? Do you want to kind of start from the bottom, or do you want to jump right in the deep end and kind of get right back in there and fight the best of the best?
I want to go right back in and fight the best of the best. Yeah, and do you know what that is? It's not like I think, this is totally honest. Like, I probably shouldn't even say this, but it's not that I think right, I'm unbeatable and I'll beat everybody that's there. It's just that like I can't get up for. Like even if I take a year off, like as you've seen in my record, I can take a year off and come back and fight Chris Fishgold, and that's just because it takes that for me to get up to fight somebody. Yeah. If I fight an unknown guy, it's a bit more for me. It's a bit more difficult, and like it's almost like a lose-lose, because if you fight against a guy that's unknown, he could be amazing for all you know. Yeah. But if you beat him, nobody cares. And if he beats you, everybody goes, "Oh, you got beat off that guy from such and such a country that nobody knows." Yeah. And he could be great, you know what I mean? But I'd rather fight a name in this country, so I have to just wait. But I'm gonna leave it up to the bosses up there and say, okay, who do you want me to fight, and I'll take whatever you give me.
Yeah. Why was the move to intensity? What you make of their management? They've always got a lot of Cage Warriors fighters under them. Why intensity?
Why intensity? Well, yeah, because like if you look at all the fighters that have signed to the UFC and in Europe, and look at the amount of them, their intensity, that's not a coincidence. And also because I really got on well with Graham and Ian right from the very first time I went to Cage Warriors, and like I just liked them, you know what I mean? Yeah. And there's that Irish thing as well, with Graham and stuff like that, and I don't know, it's just that when you get a feel for people and you think, that's who I want to work with. Not that I had any problems with the people I was working with before, it was just that they were a better place to take me where I want to go. Yeah. And like straight away I got sent to Vegas, to represent Cage Warriors and stuff like that, and that was like, you know, a free trip to Vegas straight off the first. That was like the first thing that happened. I was like, oh, this is probably a good deal, you know. Yeah, and like, and with the BT Sport and Fight Pass and all that stuff happening at once, it was like, just seemed right, you know. It seemed like the smartest plan.
Yeah. Was it always Cage Warriors? Was there never any, I think, consideration of any other promotion? Was it always, you know, Cage Warriors?
Nah. Not for me personally, right? And I'm not trying to slag all the promotions off, but the thing that I liked about Cage Warriors is like, it's, you know, do you know when you're at this level is that you are a professional fighter, but you're not making enough money to pay like your mortgage with it. Yeah. We're all teaching classes and we're all doing all our things. If you're not, you know what I mean, unless you're at the very top end of Cage Warriors or BAMA or Bellator or you're in the UFC, right? So for me, it's not about the money. It's more about how they treat you, you know. And I've heard some bad things with other organizations. Yeah. I won't tell stories, you know what I mean. But whereas when I work with Cage Warriors, like if you like the hotels have always been amazing. The staff have always been like professional, you know what I mean. When you go to get changing rooms, are always great. And you go to other places, it's like you're getting warmed up, and you're like getting warmed up in a porta cabin, you know what I mean, with desks in it, and you're thinking, really, am I trained my whole life to do this? Yeah. And that's really what made me want to do it. You know, the locations and all. Like we've been to Chechnya and Jordan and all these places, and like, yeah, it's always been great. Like no matter what, as a cornerman or as a fighter, I've just loved it, and I wouldn't want to go anywhere else. Yeah. Well,
Ryan, I look forward to your return. Hopefully I'll be there, and hopefully you can pick up a win on your return. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, and hopefully we'll speak soon. Thank you.